APEC 2018 in Papua New Guinea. Harnessing inclusive opportunities. Hobnob with the global decision makers as Tian Wei presents diverse voices and sharp interviews.
Our APEC Time special, only on World Insight. APEC leaders created the APEC Business Advisory Council, or ABAC, to be the primary voice of businesses, and it has facilitated the dialogue between business and political leaders. Ning Gaoning, the co-chair of ABAC, will moderate one of those closed-door dialogues this time. Chinese President Xi Jinping will be taking part in that dialogue. I asked Ning what we should expect from that dialogue. Mr. Ning, welcome to CGTN. There has been a lot of interactions during every year's APEC week between the business leaders and the political leaders. What do you think could be the priority this time?
This year is very focused on trade, free trade, and regional economic integration. We almost, including the American delegation, we all support free trade, we all support globalization, we all support regional economic integration, multinational trade agreement.
Well, one of the things you see, Mr. Ning, is the division between the political leaders and the business leaders in our world today, with very different priorities. One is about election cycles, and the other possibly is about how to make profits and have sustainable businesses around the world. Are you going to really communicate well?
Some of the political leaders using the business cycle or business activity, particularly trading activity between countries, as a tool to help their election. So I don't think they will do good for the country in the long run. But in short run, somebody being, let's say, misled, thought they have to be firm or they have to fight on something. So this is something worried the business. Yeah.
But on the other hand, this is nothing new. I mean, politicians looking at the elections...
Getting worse and worse.
Getting worse and worse. That's your experience, coming from decades being in the ABAC.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You know, APEC, designed, established 25 years ago for the reason of free trade. It used to be a very influential, powerful, respected organization. Every year, leaders and business community dialogue, and they got a lot of conversation, exchange views for the reason of making the business environment better. Today, people feel that the different stretched power try to influence this their direction. But business is clear, because this is not a political organization. This is an economic business organization. Every company, globalized or local, they want to do business, they want to trade, they want to have a fair and a free market. You
are going to moderate the panel in which the Chinese president, together with some of the other state leaders, are going to join business leaders. And you're also going to facilitate the Q&A session between the Chinese president and the business leaders in your group. What is likely to be the direction of the conversation from your perspective?
This is going to be the sixth times for me to moderate.
And it's closed door, of course.
Closed door. The format is plenary. The plenary, all the 21 economy leaders will hear what the business want to say together. And usually the host country this time is Prime Minister Peter O'Neill will respond to the business leaders' letter to the leaders. Then we will have this, they call breakout session, 5 groups. So President Xi will be in the group number 1. I get the honor to accompany him this time. It's the 6th time. So together with another 4 countries leaders. So the question now we collect from the business community are very focused. Mainly it's free trade, WTO, and low and middle income countries' growth, and the digital revolution.
Right.
Basically, this is the question around this area. So the most popular or the most focused question to President Xi will be trade tension between U.S. and China, and the Belt and Road Initiative. So how the Belt and the Road Initiative now is carrying out, and how this trade war is going to be ended. Particularly when President Xi is going to visit, I think it's the end of this month, to meet President Trump in Argentina. I mean, people anticipate there's an answer, and there's some hope to settle this trade dispute.
What does it mean to business community when there is an apparent trade war between China and the United States, two of the largest going on? What does it mean to your business? What does it mean to your American counterparts?
Between each country, not only U.S., China, and other countries too.
Because we're all on this global supply chain.
Exactly. The Chinese market, today we don't buy U.S. soybean anymore. We buy from Brazil more.
I know you used to sell soybeans.
Yeah, but I mean, it's funny because it's a cycle. It's a cycle getting around. I mean, now we're not selling to China. We're selling to today is Iran. Iran sell to China or somebody. Or sell to Europe. The whole global supply chain or trading is the same, but you change the route. You cost more in logistics. So people are kind of finding a new way to maneuver to transport their goods. But actually, it's the whole production and distribution and the trading still happening.
So what does it tell you? It's all politics, isn't it?
Yeah, it only costs more, nothing else. Costs more to everybody.
According to the latest figures, it seems that U.S.-China trade at the moment not yet suffered that lot, not to mention the others businesses around the world. But the question is, what's going to come the year after the next year or the year after next?
The trade conflict will cause the investment and the manufacturing and the whole economic, geographic change. It's starting now, actually. Somebody will think if there's a trade barrier, so we may want to reduce the supply from this country. Somebody may want to build some facility in other country. So you change the landscape.
And therefore, how should businesses prepare for that?
China will be more open, will be lower its tariff, and it will open its market more, investment more. And I think Chinese companies, what company will do? Company must prepare themselves for global competition. It's more global and more, let's say, technology-oriented, and it will be more and more become a global village market. Yes, it will give a lot of challenge to the Chinese companies, but the door is open. There's no way back. So something we have to go and face the challenge.
Trade and economic ties used to be the stabilizing factor in some of the most complicated bilateral relations, U.S.-China as well. But now, it seems that this stabilizing factor and the so-called foundation has been somewhat shaken. And therefore, people really wonder, what's going to be the role of trade and economic ties among countries? Is it going to be the most turbulent from now on as we speak?
When I was in the U.S. 30-something years ago, U.S. were very protective on their car market against the Japanese car.
That's right.
So things just happened and a problem resolved. Who's going to win the game? The people with best companies and the most productive, high productivity companies, innovation companies, competitive companies. So I mean, sooner or later, China will face this anyway. So maybe this whole thing, if China suddenly open too much, it's a national industry facing a lot of challenge. A little bit early, we thought we can be protected for a while. But today, it's not up to us to decide.
Mr. Ning, in your answer, I seem to read two messages.
Yeah.
One is about whether there is what some people call a Thucydides trap, namely an incumbent power and a rising power, whether they are destined to have some kinds of dramatic turbulence. And
Yeah.
the second part is about China's own process of reform and opening up and how its economy is going to restructure itself. So let's talk about some of these separately and then maybe together. About the Thucydides trap, Mr. Ning. So it seems that you believe it's not likely to be one between China and the United States.
You know, from a business point of view,
That's right.
I think U.S. benefit from the U.S. much more. You know, because the cheap labor, the low-cost things, the foreign currency reserve by the bond, everything. It's an economy.
It's an ecosystem.
It's architecture. Somebody will say, oh, look, the U.S., their growth and their personal income or benefit were not improving as fast as China. It's basically what they say. But it's not fair because they are already in a very high standard. Internally, they get their own problem on income gap, education,
inclusiveness,
races, everything. So you can't blame China for all these sort of things.
You mentioned about China's reform process. 40 years reform and opening up already. You and I have all been benefiting from this process, everyone in China.
Of course, yes.
But Mr. Ning, over the years, what do you think are the biggest takeaways that could help us now at a very difficult time, apparently at least? After all, you served in the state-owned enterprises for decades. After all, you also went overseas to study and work. So what do you think is the biggest takeaway that could be very useful today?
It's very obvious, open.
As simple as that as well?
If you want another market, open market. If you keep these two, I think the economy will prosper.
What do you think about the philosophical, in a way, relationship between these two so-called outside ecosystem and inside drive for reform and change?
This could be the most difficult part, to balance that. And it's also the most difficult part for any foreign business or even government to understand. It's difficult for a country, a relatively young country, relatively small population country, not a complex country to understand, to balance between the stability and the growth, and to balance between the openness and the control or governance. We are celebrating the 40 years anniversary of the open door policy. 40 years in human beings' history is so short.
Yes.
The real growth for China is about 20 years, actually. So it's not 40. 40 years, they started. In the first 20 years, you prepare a lot.
It's laying the foundation.
You know, laying the foundation, accumulate all the momentum.
And then you got to take it off.
Then you take off. And the economy taking off about 20 or 15 years, I think.
That's right.
And you can't stop it anymore. You know, when people feel 20 years ago, when people get a good idea, a project they want to invest, the first thing they want to find is money. Today, ideas. You know, nobody, as long as a good project, plenty of investors. But 20 years ago, it's not. Since then, the economy taking off. China took its own way, own route, and people don't understand. But if you put in this whole Chinese kind of growing story to in a historical environment, background, you understand what's happening. I mean, China tried many ways in history, tried many different ways, but this way succeeded.
We're all students of history. Before we go, I want to ask you a final question, Mr. Ning. The quality of leadership in the business world today, particularly given the dramatic changing environment, political environment, the ecosystem as well, what do you think are some of the most important qualities?
I think will be vision and leadership. When I say vision, I say you have to be able to think of the future. Nobody can predict 100% right, but you have to do things for the future. Then you have to have a leadership to manage your team. For other things, it's very unpredictable. I mean, you don't try to get them all, but as long as you get a direction, and you get the people together, I think you will achieve your goal.
The two must, as you say. Chinese President Xi Jinping is to deliver a speech on the 17th.
Yeah.
What are you expecting from him?
I think he will tell, I guess, he will tell the world, tell the CEOs, China will continue to open its door to reform. He will give the whole business community a lot of confidence.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ning, for taking your time out of a very busy schedule here at APEC.